Hey, hello guys, welcome back to part 2. Let's start where we left it. So, this part talks about actual speaking methods and everything from the course. Okay, so
part of our course. You've already now, by this time, gained a great understanding of the band descriptors. You know what you're supposed to do in regards to your fluency, coherence, lexical ability, grammar, range, and accuracy, and coherence. In addition to that, you've also been given some general tips and advice that apply to all three sections of the exam. Now, in this lecture, we're going to specifically talk about IELTS speaking part number 1. I'm going to explain the section in great detail and give you some very specific tips, advice, and strategies that apply to IELTS speaking part number 1. By the end of this lecture, you'll know exactly what you need to do to get a great score on part number 1. After this lecture, there's going to be a series of lectures where I'm going to really give you some great sample answers for part number 1. So let's get started. First of all, there really are kind of two parts to part number 1. We first have the opening questions. And these opening questions are questions that almost everyone gets. So they're going to ask, of course, about your name. Are you a student or do you have a job? Where do you live sometimes? Normally, this first part would take about 2 minutes. Then they're going to get into some more specific topic questions that might cover colors, cell phones, plants, hair, wild animals, perfume, voice changes, reading, music, a lot more specific topics. Some of these topics might come out of left field. You might not be prepared for it. And that's on purpose. The reason why is they want to be able to see how well can you handle, how well can you speak spontaneously? Are you able to get a topic that you haven't really thought of or considered? And can you really speak spontaneously and really show a lot of fluency, coherence, great grammar, and vocabulary? The total time on part number 1 is about 4 to 6 minutes. Generally, it ranges around 5 minutes, and the total questions are normally around 12 questions. Now, basically, this is how it starts. There's some variations depending on who the examiner is. This is basically how the test starts. In the beginning, they're going to go ahead and introduce themselves, ask for your name. Then they're going to say, what can I call you? And you might say something like, I've had many nicknames, but I'm most comfortable with Benny. Now, don't really play around in terms of really giving your name. Don't try to get too cute. Just give your name and move on to the next part. Next, they're going to ask you your origin, where are you from? Technically, I'm from Benin, but I've lived 19 of my 20 years in Accra, Ghana. Identification. Please show me your identification. No problem. Let me grab my passport, or would you prefer another identification? This is normally how every test will begin, right? It normally will begin this way. Here are some general advice, tips, and strategies that are going to help you to do really, really well. It's one thing to understand this in your mind. It's another to actually be able to do it under time pressure. That's why simulating the exam, working under a clock, is so important. Sure, you can just practice it or really say, well, I understand what you're talking about, but you have to do it within the context of an exam setting. So the first big piece of advice that I have is general to specific. This is crucial to doing well on part number 1. Answer directly and then specifically explain why. The next tip that I'll cover is in regards to paraphrasing and synonyms. Examiners love when you can paraphrase and use synonyms. Always change the question language. And the final strategy would be to stay on topic and know when to stop speaking. Don't go outside of the subject of the question. This normally happens when you just ramble on, just keep rambling on and on and on. They ask you a question about, do you like music? And then you just keep rambling on and eventually start talking about the types of music, and start talking about how long just really, what kind of music your family likes. You just go on and on and on outside the context of the question. And finally, really set your eyes on the examiner. Know when the examiner is getting ready to ask you a new question. That way you can wrap it up. Wrap up your answer and get ready. Here's some more tips and strategies and advice. You really want to, I'm not going to speak on everything on this list, but you really want to highlight, I really want to highlight giving mistake-free sentences. Examiners love when you're able to give mistake-free sentences. That means sentences that are free of grammar, word choice, and pronunciation mistakes. If you really want to be the type of student that's scoring 8, 9 on your speaking, you have to be able to do this. Smooth sentences. If you're able to go smoothly from beginning to end without the pausing, the hesitation, the ums and the ahs, you help yourself out a lot. Examiners also love topic-specific vocabulary. If they're asking you a question about language, give a lot of specific vocabulary about the topic of language. Don't answer in general. Answer with specific vocabulary. Don't parrot. Don't repeat the question. Discourse markers are important, but don't overuse them, okay? Don't overuse them. In some of the examples that I'm going to give you, I'm going to use a lot of discourse markers only because I'm trying to show you how they're used, okay? I'm trying to show you the strategy for using them. But don't try to use one in every single sentence. Don't do that. Sentence variety is very important. If you are only speaking in simple sentences, your grammar score is going to be a 5. And answer naturally. Give natural answers. Do not give memorized answers. We can always tell when you're giving a memorized answer. Don't do it. Here are some mistakes that I want you to avoid. Okay? Number one, try to really avoid these filler phrases. Yes, native speakers use these, but most of the time when a non-native speaker does it, it sounds prepared. It sounds like, okay, now it's my turn to go ahead and say, that's an interesting question, so I'm going to say that. It doesn't sound natural. So my general advice is just avoid doing it. Watch out for speaking in fragments. I do understand that a lot of times in natural speech, students do, not students, but native speakers speak in fragments. But for you, they're grading your English. So I want you really to use complete sentences, please. Watch out for answering the wrong question. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can't just say the topic of the question is food. So I'm just going to talk about food. And they may have asked you a specific question, like what type of food do you like to eat? What type of food do you like to eat in the evening? So if you start talking about lunch and breakfast items and other things, then you're going to be marked down for that. Okay? Answer the specific question that you were asked. And finally, avoid being a perfectionist. If you worry about your grammar, whatever grammar you know, when the exam starts is what you have. Don't worry about it. Right? If you do, you can end up messing up your fluency, pronunciation, and coherence marks. So, how can you extend your answer? Now, what we're getting into now is really the key to your doing a great job on part number one. How do you extend your answer? Well, you can compare. I used to drive in Accra, but now I prefer public transportation because. Next, you can contrast details to extend. Yes, I do research on the internet. However, my favorite method is through books. So, give reasons why. I prefer dry weather as opposed to wet and humid because I have breathing challenges that require. Finally, you can combine and add details. Yes, I enjoy street food enormously because it's cheap. In addition to this, and then you finish it off. Extend your answers, everybody. That's what I want you to do. When you are speaking in part number one, extend the answer. Answer, extend, stop. Answer, extend, stop. Now, we're going to move on to what I said earlier was really, really important. Speaking from general to specific. To make sure you understand this, I'm going to give you 4 good examples of what I mean by speaking general to specific. I need you to do this in part number one, please. Example 1. What foods do you like the most? Pizza is my favorite food of all time. That's a general statement, right? Now, extend it with something specific. Not only do I love the cheese, but also the thick crusted bread, rich tomato sauce, Italian pepperoni, and an array of locally grown vegetables. Specific. Go from general to specific. Next example. Where would you like to live? I hope to relocate to New Zealand for future veterinary studies. If I can arrange the visa and employment after completing my degree, I will work in the hiking profession where I will have a peaceful and enjoyable life in the mountains, away from the crowds and the pollution. General to specific. Example 3. Do you like to watch television? First, we have the general statement. Answer the question. Every blue moon, I might check out what's on TV. That's a general statement, general answer. Then, get specific. Currently, the NBA is having its regular season, and if the Lakers are on, I might watch a couple of quarters if the game is interesting. Specific. And finally, example number 4. What do you dislike about your job? The element that causes me the most frustration are the working hours. Take last Tuesday, for example, where the boss insisted that the entire team extend the workday until 6 p.m., which caused me to miss my son's piano recital. General to specific. This is a really, really important concept, everybody. And when you're answering in part number 1, if you want to do well, this is what you have to do. Be able to go from general to specific. You'll notice that I was also paraphrasing the question as well. Now, we're going to move into more about really paraphrasing the question. Here, I'm just really focusing on paraphrasing the question. I'm not going to extend the answer. I'm just really trying to show you how you go about paraphrasing the question. So first, do you work or are you a student? I used to be employed, but now I'm learning the fine art of architecture. Did you ever live in the countryside? I've never resided in a rural area, but I wouldn't say I'm ignorant of the lifestyle there. What do you like or dislike about this place? I can come up with a few pros and cons associated with my current housing situation. So let's look at these three. Work, employed, learning, student. Used to be, really good fluency tool to be able to give a nice extended answer. Rural area, countryside. Resided, live, lifestyles related to countryside and living also. Come up with. Using these kind of phrases is really great. The phrases like come up with are the kind of phrases, idiomatic language that they really, really like a lot. Pros and cons, like or dislike, housing situation, and place. That's what we call the art of paraphrasing the question. Some of you may be saying, well, this is really difficult. How can I do that? It comes with practice. It's a skill. You have to really, really work on being able to do it, and it happens through practice. Do you consider yourself a patient person? Being a fairly even-tempered practitioner of meditation, I'd answer affirmatively that I can tolerate delays. Do you prefer to be busy all the time or not? I'm sorry, but I wouldn't select a lifestyle that required me to be constantly occupied or absorbed around the clock. Do you like to dye your hair? Certainly. Coloring my locks is an activity I adore because I visually appear to be someone new and exciting. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about understanding the art of paraphrasing. Paraphrasing, again, it means similar meaning or the same thought as the original. You're changing up the words, you're saying it in a different way, you're changing the word order, you're paraphrasing. Sometimes the object becomes the subject becomes the object. That's part of paraphrasing. So let's look here. Let's look at this one right here. Why is violent crime rising among teenagers? Why is violent crime rising among teenagers? We have the word violent. We can find synonyms for that. We can paraphrase that language. Crime, teenagers. And here is a student response. Brutal offenses are definitely on the rise among adolescents. In fact, numerous factors could explain this, but I would point towards a lack of parenting, violent video gaming, and poor schooling. Out of those three, I would settle on absent caretakers as the primary cause because that's who holds responsibility for refining morals and ethics in young people. Brutal, violent, offense, crime, adolescent, teenager. Paraphrase, 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 right? Here we see some idiomatic phrasal verb language like point towards, settle on, collocations, holding responsibility, fluency language, in fact. Out of those three, fluency language, because helps you to extend an answer, right? This helps you with your fluency. Now, let's look at a poor answer versus a great answer. Is your hometown a good place? Poor response. Yes, my hometown is a good place. Now, that's probably going to be funny, and you might be laughing at that. But I've talked to a lot of students, and they answer this way, and then I check them on it. I say, well, why'd you do that? And they just forgot the time, the clock, the pressure. It makes people do that. So you have to really practice so you can avoid doing that. Here's a great response. Is your hometown a good place? Definitely. Most consider Shanghai to be a great city, but I would take it a step further and say it's fantastic. What other metropolis has water villages, historic sites, colorful nightlife, and excellent international food? Not many. We have a lot of great language here. Great city, good, fantastic, good. Instead of repeating hometown, just say the specific city. And then we have some great vocabulary, water villages, historic sites, colorful nightlife. That's all subject-specific vocabulary. Now, let's go ahead and talk about subject-specific vocabulary. What type of food do you like to eat? Here's a student response. I wouldn't consider myself a picky eater. I'll gobble down almost anything except mountain oysters or crawfish. On an average day, I might throw together a dish of stewed guinea fowl with a rich and creamy mushroom sauce. Then, as a reward for making such a fine supper, I'd polish off the meal with a decadent peach cobbler topped with delicious vanilla ice cream. I'll read that again. You'll notice here everything that's underlined is subject-specific vocabulary. Now, keep in mind, I'm really just trying to show you what I mean by subject-specific vocabulary. I would not expect you, in your answer, to use this much subject-specific vocabulary. If you're able to use 11 types of subject-specific vocabulary in one answer, then I would say you're probably one of those 9 students that I have. Okay? What type of food do you like to eat? I wouldn't consider myself a picky eater. I'll gobble down almost anything except mountain oysters or crawfish. On an average day, I might throw together a dish of stewed guinea fowl with a rich and creamy mushroom sauce. Then, as a reward for making such a fine supper, I polish off the meal with a decadent peach cobbler topped with delicious vanilla ice cream. Here's another example of using idioms in context. What are your plans after finishing your university studies? Here is a student answer. I've actually taken this into account. I'll start a crash course in Python coding as I believe it can be a valuable skill in my future profession. With the rapid changes in my field, I need to be up to the minute on all the latest advancements. To be at the top of the pile, I think it's necessary to go the extra mile. Again, I would not expect you to use all these idioms in one answer. I'm just trying to show you how these different idioms are used. Something else you'll notice is here, it says I will, but when I was speaking, I said I'll. That's because in speaking, you use contractions, okay? You use contractions. That's what you do. Thank you very much for joining me in this opening. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next lecture where I'll be giving you some specific examples. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon. Somewhere else. To be honest, I can't imagine another nation I'd rather have as a permanent home than Ghana, as it's more business and culturally oriented than most countries I've come to know. However, if we're speaking on a temporary basis, then yes, I'd feel privileged to reside in another city that has snow and ice, since that's so different from my weather. Finally, is your city a good place for young people? Over the past 2 years, Ghana has doubled its tourism due to the incredible nightlife, beaches, unique adventures, and cultural excursions. So I'd absolutely recommend any young adult to visit Accra. And we could actually finish that off if we wanted to add one more sentence by saying, most of us in our 20s and 30s aren't particularly rich, so Accra would be an attractive option since it's so budget friendly to go along with a warm sense of hospitality. Moving on with a couple of more where are you from responses. Here we're going to look at what are some places of interest in your town and do you like your hometown? First, to tell you the truth, Marrakesh has too many exciting features to name just a few. However, the primary reason visitors choose Marrakesh is for the Medina. In addition, tourists are drawn to the city because of the ancient palaces and outstanding gardens. Do you like your hometown? Certainly. I love Marrakesh. I say this because I have the best of both worlds in that I can experience the old Amazigh way of life in the nearby villages and take part in the modernization that has occurred in Marrakesh. Thank you very much for joining us in this first video that covers basically where you're from. Some of the language that you saw in that video, the language that was highlighted in red is particular vocabulary that is useful when you're speaking. And the language that you saw in green is just really related to grammar in terms of advanced level grammar. And then in purple, that language is language that is specifically for fluency purposes, language that you can use to extend your answers and sound more fluent. And in the next videos, I'll get more into that in terms of kind of, really getting more specific in terms of what's in red, green, and purple. Okay, so I'll talk to you soon, and thanks a lot. Okay, one of the main questions that you're going to get is going to involve, are you a student or do you have a job? So here are some sample answers in case you are a student and you need to answer these types of questions. Please pay attention to some of the phrases that I'm using, the grammar, the fluency language, the vocabulary. So let's go ahead and move forward and get into this. So, part one, work or study question. So they're going to ask you a question like you see here. Do you work or study? And a typical answer would be something like this. I used to be employed as an archaeologist, but now I'm a full-time student in the field of ancient philosophy. I've been studying this subject for the past year and plan to complete my doctorate by 2021. If you notice here, you see the language in purple used to is really good fluency language. We're using synonyms, employed for work, full-time student for study, field of, dealing with study. Here we're using one of the perfect tenses, I've been. Here we're using a different word form. Instead of studying, I'm using studying, showing that I can change the word form. And the word doctorate is related also to study. Of utilitarianism was applicable 200 years ago and is still debated today on its solving the ills of modern society. The thing is of course, that's fluency language. Again, we're not going to use these words in the question. Enjoy instead of saying like, enamored with instead of saying like. More fluency language, what I mean by that is utilitarianism is related to the topic of philosophy. We're using a compound sentence here and a compound sentence in the first part, right? That's how you can really create and hit all those different levels within the rubric. And our final question, is your subject popular to study in your country? Although philosophy has become favored in Western countries, it has not taken hold in modern China to a high degree as in the past. Unfortunately, materialism attracts most Chinese citizens. Therefore, they seek a doctorate based upon the wealth it can garner instead of the wisdom and knowledge imparted by Lao Tzu, Mozi, or Confucius. Here, we're starting out with a complex sentence that shows I can say a complex sentence properly. We're using a lot of really good phrases like to a high degree, taken hold. Unfortunately, it really helps us to really extend the previous sentence. That helps with your fluency. Other really good vocabulary based upon is a really good collocation. Garner, which is money, which means like earning. Another good vocabulary word there. Another good phrase, imparted by. Those are the kind of phrases that you want to be able to use, the type of language you want to be able to use to really, really increase your score. Okay? Thank you very much for joining us in this video on how to give answers to to being a student question. Thanks a lot. In the next video, we're going to move on and look at some typical answers for if you're working or if you have a job. Okay, now in the previous video, we went over the sample answers to the study question. Now we're going to go over some sample answers to the work question. So really pay attention. One thing that I'll advise you to do, I really want you to do, in fact, is work on your pronunciation, okay? After you hear me say an answer choice, why don't you just stop the video and then try to say the answer with the same type of pronunciation, the the same type of chunking that I'm using. Really try to use my art in terms of pronunciation so that you can improve what you're doing on the exam. So that's something I want you to do throughout the entire speaking section of this course. Use me as a model so you can work on your pronunciation. All right, so let's look at some work answers. So our first one, do you work or are you a student? Right, well, until last August 2018, I was seeking a master's in computer science. But since graduating, I've been working in my field of software development. Currently, IBM employs me in their new products division located in Accra, Ghana. Okay, here we're starting off with fluency language, right well. We're using some, we're talking going from the past to the present. Again, I mentioned that earlier, going from saying what you were doing before and then leading into what you're doing now is a great way to really give a nice, fluent answer. We're using a compound sentence, right? And then we're using the perfect continuous, I've been working. Software development, again, subject specific, right? So new products division, right? That's also subject specific vocabulary related to work. So really take hold to what I'm trying to teach you here so you can really increase your score. Next, what do you dislike about your job? Recently, I've been considering the pros and cons of my employment. At the end of the day, I like 90% of my work responsibilities, but I would have to say that I disapprove of the long working hours and the unusual schedule that results from us having to collaborate with clients in Japan. Right here we have a lot of good language. Pros and cons. Instead of saying dislike, employment, instead of saying job, fluency language. At the end of the day, right? Work responsibilities. That's a really good collocation there. Compound sentence, but, right? I would have to say that. Fluency language. Disapprove, dislike synonym. Collaborate is really good work vocabulary, right? If you're really answering in this way, we're starting with an average recently. If you're answering and using all of these different aspects that I'm trying to teach you, this is how you move up the rubric. Would you consider changing your job in the future? As I was saying, I enjoy 90% of my duties with IBM. Could another company really offer more than 90% satisfaction? Here's the thing. If I shift to another employer, I might discover that the grass is not greener on the other side. Therefore, I intend to remain at IBM for the foreseeable future. Now, what I don't want you to do is this. Don't try to memorize the format. Don't try to memorize what I wrote here. Don't memorize, right? Because when you do that, you're going to be able to tell that the person is reading or is basically reading something they have pre-prepared. That's why it's always tricky when I'm teaching people how to do the speaking, and the people want to say, well, let me see, can I see what some answers look like? Yeah, I can show you, but the way that I might answer this if I were just being answered, and I'll do this later on when I do a practice, but the way that you speak is not the way that you write. I am trying here to include some of that fluency language, but that's what I'm telling you. Really, from here, I want you pulling out the fluency language you can use and practice using, pull out the grammatical forms that I'm using and try to use them, pull out the vocabulary that I'm using. That's what I want you to do here, okay? Don't memorize. Okay, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you again in the next sample answer video. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move into another one of the standard typical questions that you might get in part one, which is your housing. Again, it might be only one question about your housing and then they move on. It might be two questions about your housing, could be three. But let's look at some sample answers so you can have a good idea of how you're supposed to answer this question at a high level. So, of course, it might be something as straightforward as, where do you live? And a typical answer might be like this. Currently, I'm residing with a homestay family located in Tallahassee, Florida, a state in the southern part of the United States. I was placed with this 4-person family by a housing agency that works with students who are on a temporary visa, and I've been domiciled there for the past 2 years. Right? So currently is the word currently is definitely used for sounding more native speaker like for fluency. Residing instead of lived. Homestay is subject specific vocabulary. Located is related to live. Then I give the city, the state, and where it's actually located in terms of what part of the country. Then we go to a 4-person family, housing agency vocabulary, perfect tense used correctly, past perfect tense. So that's a standard, again, general to specific. Now, next question. What do you like most about the place? Well, there are numerous benefits that I could speak on, but if I had to narrow it down, I'd settle on the family. When I matriculated to the USA to study, I wanted total immersion in English, and this verbose family speaks perfectly accented English with a wide range of vocabulary. Right here, we have a lot of phrasal verbs and idiom. We have like speak on, idiom narrow it down, settle on, really good vocabulary related to moving someplace or being someplace, matriculated. We're using a compound complex sentence when we have the subordinate conjunction when with the coordinate conjunction and. We're really forming that high level type of sentence that they like. And final question, what are some changes in the area that you'd like? And here is an answer where maybe you can learn from. Overall, I'm overjoyed with my living situation, but one alteration to the neighborhood that I'd appreciate would be converting the abandoned areas to dog parks. Right around the corner from my residence is an empty lot, filled nightly with shady characters hanging out. If they redesign this eyesore, it would make it unattractive to these undesirable vagabonds. Right, now here you have a lot of vocabulary that you can pull from. Right, a lot of vocabulary that you can pull from. Phrases right around the corner, shady characters, phrasal verb hanging out, redesign for change. Okay? So alteration for change, converting for change. This type of language is how you really move yourself up the rubric, how you really move yourself up the scale, right? That's what you want to be able to do. Again, do not try to memorize. Don't try to memorize. Just take the ideas, take the language, practice using the language yourself. If you try to memorize something, it's not you. That's why when you're doing it on the exam, when you're memorizing something, we can actually tell that you have something memorized. You're supposed to take this language and practice using it your own. Don't look at what I'm doing and try to. Now, if you want to just work on your pronunciation, then of course, repeat after me and work on your pronunciation. But when it comes time to developing your own answers, speaking your own answers, just try to add this into what you're doing, okay? All right, so thank you very much for joining us on this sample housing answer. And now in the next set of videos, I'm going to be going into more of the specific topics dealing with a range of topics, street markets, coffee and tea, varied perfume, different types of topics. Okay? So I'll join you soon and have a great day. Okay, let's go ahead and get ready to get into some of the more subject-specific questions that you might face on IELTS speaking part number 1. There are a lot of different topics that they can go to, lots of different topics, well over 200 different topics. So what we're doing here is just giving you an example of some language use, really trying to show you a lot of the kind of vocabulary that you can use, grammar that you can use, fluency that you can use. This language, especially when it comes to the grammar and the fluency, is applicable to any topic, right? It's applicable to any topic. That's why you want to be able to pull out that information, not try to memorize answer choices. Okay, let's get into it. So let's talk about coffee or tea. And here we have our question. So let's listen carefully. What do you drink more? And here is a good answer that you can give. From dusk till dawn, I guzzle coffee, and I've been doing that since I first discovered it on an expedition to Ethiopia 10 years ago. I used to sip on tea when I was a teenager, but my introduction to coffee from the Ethiopian hills of Sidamo converted my drinking habit. Right? Here we have some really good language, from dusk till dawn. Right? That means from morning until night. We have a perfect continuous tense. I've been doing that. Right? Since we're using since to really be able to add more fluency and extend out our answer. I used to. Again, this is how we can have more fluency going from the past into the present. Sip on. Really good other way of being able to say a phrasal verb meaning drink. And this is actually a compound complex sentence here, which really resonates well with the examiners. When and but. Next question. Which do you usually serve your guest? Coffee or tea? If I have a visitor that I'm unfamiliar with, of course, I'd ask which they prefer. Normally, unless requested otherwise, I offer a cup of joe because I'm aware that the company I keep appreciates the taste and aroma of coffee beans. We have a lot of great language here that you can apply to any question, right? We have a conditional sentence, if would, normally, right? Normally is actually more of, I have it in red here because it's a synonym of the word usually, but normally is also really good fluency language. Really good phrase here, unless requested otherwise. That means unless somebody says anything different, or unless someone asks for something different, this is what I do. Cup of joe, synonym for coffee. Offer, synonym for serve. Company I keep, really great phrase, means what? Guest. So when people want to know, well, I keep getting a 6 in my speaking, or I keep getting a 7 in my speaking, these are the kind of things you have to do to jump up into the 8 or 9 level. Okay? Next, do you prefer different morning and evening beverages? As I stated earlier, I drink coffee sun up to sundown, so my drink selection does not change over the course of a day. If it is ever determined that coffee is overwhelmingly unhealthy for consumption, I likely change this habit. Right? A lot of good words there, a lot of advanced level English words. Determined instead of decided. Overwhelmingly unhealthy, really good collocation there. Consumption, okay, instead of drinking or drink. Really good language. That's what you want to be able to use. Really strong language. Look here, sun up to sundown. Same thing as from dusk till dawn. I'm really trying to show you how you use this language so that you can really apply it to any situation. What you need to do is take this language and try applying it to different questions, different subjects. Okay, don't try to memorize this, but take it and use it in different situations. All right, great job. Thanks for being with us. And we're now going to move into our next subject-specific topic, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, this next sample answer that we're going to give is actually from a recent test that happened in different parts of the world. This one really threw some students for a loop. And so let's go ahead and get into this, and I'll give you some answers that you could have given to some of these questions. All right, let's talk about haircuts. Yes, you could actually get asked a question about haircuts or perfume or plants or flowers or gifts. Sometimes they ask very, very strange questions, but there's a purpose in that. They want to be able to throw you off balance a little bit and see if you're able to really answer questions, or are you trying to just answer from prepared things you've already seen before. That's why they do this. So let's look at this first set of questions here. Do you like to dye your hair? In my country, the typical man doesn't really color their hair. However, I'm unconventional and actually enjoy the experience of entering the salon with brown hair and exiting with green tresses. The sight of a new color on top of my head changes my mood for the better. There we have some really good vocabulary. Color their hair, color enjoy instead of like. Again, brown hair, green tresses. Again, we're dealing with synonyms of dye. Changes my mood for the better, synonym for like. Next question. Have you ever had a bad haircut? I've had the experience of a horrible visit to an inexperienced barber. I can still vividly recall looking in the mirror, mouth agape, in horror, at the bald runway along the middle of my head. Apparently, the barber forgot to reattach the guard to the clippers and left me looking ridiculous. Right, we have some really great language here. Right, we have the perfect tense up here, horrible for bad, really topic-specific language here. Barber, mirror, guard, clippers, a mouth agape, really good language here. Agape means open. A horror, synonym for bad. So if you're speaking and the examiner hears this kind of language, right, they're going to say, "Wow, this person must have a kind of a high level of English here." Okay. Next question. How often do you get a haircut? As far as I'm concerned, a real man should set a bi-weekly appointment with his hair technician if he can afford it. Personally, I'm in the barber chair only once a month because I'm destitute as a result of my university expenses. Once I graduate, I'll be in that chair every second and fourth Friday. Let's read that again. How often do you get a haircut? As far as I'm concerned, a real man should set a bi-weekly appointment with his hair technician if he can afford it. Personally, I'm in the barber chair only once a month because I'm destitute as a result of my university expenses. Once I graduate, I'll be in the chair every second and fourth Friday. Again, really good language as far as I'm concerned, great fluency language, bi-weekly appointment, related subject specific, hair technician, subject specific, barber chair, subject specific, once a month related to often, Second and fourth Friday related to often. Really good vocabulary word here, destitute, which means poor, right? So I hope you're able to look at some of these answers, get some advice, get some help with pronunciation. Really look at what I'm doing here. Okay? Great job, and I will talk to you in the next video. All right, in this video lecture, I'm going to give you some really good sample answers to a countryside question. Earlier in the course, I gave you some really good answers for a housing question. The countryside question is somewhat similar, but it's a little bit different. So please pay attention. All right, part one, countryside. Let's talk about living in the countryside. Did you ever live in the countryside? The rural areas are absolutely breathtaking, and I first settled there from 5 to 10 years of age. Afterwards, there was an 8-year period of city living with my family. That was followed by my return to the outskirts for university studies. Right? So I'll read that again for you. Again, if you want to, a great thing for you to do, a great practice for you to do. I don't like to say the word thing. I really try to get you all to not use those kind of words. A really good practice for you to do would be to try to repeat this and try to mimic my pronunciation. And that way, some people want to know, well, how can I work on my pronunciation? And one thing you can do is really just practice mimicking native speakers. I'm a native speaker. I'm a native speaker from the United States. And so if you want to know how a native speaker sounds, this is what we sound like. Now, of course, there are different accents because people are from different parts of the country. But if you want to do that, that's something that I would ask you to practice. Stop the tape and try to mimic my pronunciation. Okay, let's give that answer again. Did you ever live in the countryside? The rural areas are absolutely breathtaking, and I first settled there from 5 to 10 years of age. Afterwards, there was an 8-year period of city living with family that was followed by my return to the outskirts for university studies. Okay, let's move on to the next question. How did you feel about living there? To be honest, I can't recollect any specific emotions from ages 5 to 10, but when I look back on the photos from my life in the backcountry, I was smiling in every photograph. On the other hand, I have vivid recollections of the latter period during university, which was filled with peace and tranquility from the surrounding virgin forest. Next question. Would you like to live there again? To tell the truth, my long-term plan includes returning to the rural districts, where the population is under 10,000 and the beauty is undeniably green. To escape my current polluted city lifestyle, I'll take up country living again very soon. Let's read that one more time. Would you like to live there again? To tell the truth, my long-term plan includes returning to the rural districts where the population is under 10,000 and the beauty is undeniably green. To escape my current polluted city lifestyle, I'll take up country living again very soon. All right, and thank you very much for joining us with that countryside answer. I look forward to talking to you very soon. And if you have any questions, please be sure to ask. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Okay, now let's talk about another recent question from the exams. This one is dealing with mathematics or math, and I'm going to give you some sample answers to that question. Let's talk about mathematics. Part 1, mathematics. So here's our first question. Is mathematics an important subject? Here's a great answer. In general, yes. Mind you, however, I don't believe all math courses taught in school are relevant or practical to our everyday lives. Knowing the technicalities of creating a mathematical table in statistics is more meaningful in adulthood than trigonometry or calculus. Right? Now, why is that a great answer? Well, we have some really good fluency language in the very beginning, right? Mathematical table, statistics, trigonometry, calculus. Okay, I said, in general, yes. When you say mind you, however, that means that there may be some circumstances where that's not always true. Important deals with relevant, the word relevant, and the word practical. More meaningful, also a synonym for important. So you don't have to say a lot to be impressive. Two sentences that have great language is very, very impressive to an examiner. Okay, next question. Do you think it is difficult to study math? Here's an answer. Some would say that it depends on the natural talents you're born with, and I believe that to a certain extent. When it comes down to it, however, most of the challenges associated with mastering math relate to having a weak or strong foundation. Period. Stop. Right there. Stop right there. Smile at the examiner, and show them, I just gave you a great answer. I'm ready for the next question. Next. Are girls good at mathematics? Now, this is a real question from the exam, okay? This is a real question. And some of you may say, oh, well, yes, you can get these kind of questions. All right, so let's look at this question. Are girls good at mathematics? If you ask the average person, they will likely answer in the negative based upon observations and gender present in their arithmetic, algebra, or calculus classes. However, actual scientific studies reveal that young ladies are equal in ability and that their mathematical flaws result from societal bias rooted in male favoritism. All right, so those are some answers that you can give to the mathematics question. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Let's conclude today's session here.
All right,
And
and
we will cover next part in tomorrow's session for part 2. Thank you.